Okay, picture this. You're looking at a piece of paper and it is just filled with cold, rigid scientific notation. We're talking decimal points, molecular weights, precise timestamps. But then, as you read a little closer, you realize these numbers aren't tracking something boring like the boiling point of a liquid. No, they are tracking wild, completely unquantifiable human experiences. We're talking intense hallucinations, transcendent empathy, and just the total loss of baseline reality. Welcome to today's Explainer. Today we are cracking open a historical artifact that perfectly captures this absolutely incredible juxtaposition.
Our primary source for today's journey is Alexander Sasha Shulgin's Pharmacology Lab Notes, Volume 2. This covers his super prolific years between 1976 and 1980. Painstakingly transcribed and preserved by the amazing team at Erowid, this physical artifact is literally a legendary map of psychopharmacology. It's essentially a diary of consciousness, written by a chemist who used himself and his friends as the primary test subjects for hundreds of novel psychoactive compounds. Let's dive into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll follow his highly systematic approach. First, the Shulgin Lab book. Second, decoding the Shulgin scale. Third, the MD series. Fourth, exploring the 2-carbon series. And finally, we'll wrap up with the DOET and STP experiments.
All right, let's get started with Part 1, the Shulgin Lab book.
Take a look at this structure. It looks like a super boring, standard chemistry ledger, right? But this isn't just a meticulously organized table of contents. It is literally a clinical index categorizing profound states of human consciousness. You see these neat, orderly rows for the MD series, the 2-carbon series, the 3-carbon series, all complete with page numbers. Behind every single one of those page numbers is a radical, totally uncharted exploration of the human mind.
Moving right along to Section 2, decoding the Shulgin scale.
So Shulgin had this massive problem. How on earth do you rigorously quantify the depth of a psychological trip? You can't just put a number on a feeling, right? Well, he solved this by inventing his famous qualitative rating scale. Here's how it worked. A +1 means a barely noticeable threshold. A +2 means clear effects, but hey, you can still control them. A +3 marks an intense experience with a total loss of baseline reality. Basically, you can't just snap out of it. And a +4? That was reserved for a profound, super rare, and totally transcendent state of being.
This scale brilliantly illustrates his unique vocabulary. For example, on almost every single page, you'll see the word window. In Shulgin's shorthand, a window means a blend of both worlds. It's this sweet spot where he felt altered sensory effects, but could still easily, interact with normal reality. As he actually wrote in one entry, it meant he could be intoxicated but still answer phoneable or drive carable. He was always hunting for that perfect window of observation.
And he came up with some pretty amazing, slightly playful jargon, too, to clinically document physical side effects without losing his objective tone. A perfect example of this is the term tooth rubby. Instead of writing out some long medical explanation for bruxism, he just jot down tooth rubby, or peripheral grindy. This just meant the involuntary teeth clenching that so often accompanied these amphetamine-derived compounds.
Which brings us to Section 3, the MD series, focusing on the early empathogens.
Look at this quick little sketch. This simple, hand-drawn chemical structure is literally the key to unlocking profound emotional empathy. This is Shulgin's own drawing of MDMA. It's just lines and letters representing carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, but the effects this specific arrangement produced on his consciousness, absolutely monumental.
What's wild is how methodically he tracked this stuff. This timeline maps his 120 milligram dose of MDMA, taken at exactly 9:20 a.m. on January 25, 1977. At exactly 30 minutes in, he notes it's coming on strong, with slight nausea. By minute 55, he logs a marked time slowing, noting that this is a people drug. By the 2-hour and 10-minute mark, he writes he can emerge okay and relax. And by 4.5 hours, it's pretty much all gone except for that peripheral grindy feeling in his jaw we talked about. It is just a stunningly precise mapping of a mood-altering journey. But here's the real kicker. What happens when you tweak that dosage? Just a tiny bit changes the entire response. A few months later, in June 1977, Shulgin escalated his dose to 160 milligrams. And that delicate window he loved so much at the lower doses, it was completely shattered by the intensity of the chemical reality.
At this higher dosage, his notes totally shift. He records a sudden intox and notes more teeth clench that sustains well into the 3rd hour. He writes, mentally okay, physical teeth and eye unfocus. This just perfectly shows his total dedication to finding the exact threshold where a drug crosses over from being a gentle, empathetic window to a heavy, physically overwhelming intoxication.
Okay, let's jump into the deep end. Section 4. Exploring the 2-carbon series. Things are about to get really chaotic and visual.
This right here is 4-bromo-2-carbon, or what you probably know better today as 2CB. I want to remind you that this exact tiny arrangement of atoms is what directly triggers the intense neurological storms he records next. It's a really clean, elegant drawing of a molecule, but the effects it unleashed were anything but orderly.
Now, contrast that neat little drawing with what actually happened to him. These are his wildly subjective, honestly almost frightening notes from a 44 milligram dose he took in July 1978. Shulgin reports explosively intense hallucinations. He tries to just go to bed in the dark, but he sees blood on faces and wild, active 2001 lines. He writes that the living room is grossly distorted, and he notes a full +3 intense neurological excitement. The objective scientist is suddenly navigating a subjective hurricane.
Then we have this compound from the same family, which he shorthands as Aleph-2. And the potency here is just absolutely mind-blowing. While that intense 2CB trip required 44 milligrams, this specific molecular arrangement produced an overwhelmingly powerful intellectual explosion on a tiny, tiny dose of just 5 milligrams.
So he takes that 5 milligram dose on a Sunday morning in November 1976. His notes outline a sheer cognitive powerhouse. He records visual distortions, like the wood literally moving in his fireplace, a total loss of appetite, and these deep, profound thoughts on nonverbal communication. But the most fascinating part is what he calls an intellectual explosion. He wrote, "There is light all around me. I can make things flow." He felt this massive intellectual high where he could almost command reality itself, stating it was an incredible tool to explore the intellectual unknown.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, the DOET and STP experiments, and specifically the psychosis aspects. With the DOT molecule, we see another slight variation in the chemical structure, but with this one, Shulgin documented a very, very thin line between having profound psychological insight and just experiencing total sensory chaos. Picture this. It's an October afternoon in 1977. He takes 6 milligrams of DOET. His notes from this day perfectly capture the crazy duality of his work. On one hand, he maintains enough objective, grounded physical reality to carefully rotate a delicate glass laboratory flask without dropping it. But on the other hand, he is projecting absolute sensory wildness onto the outside world, describing the experience as literally having psychosis aspects.
You have got to hear this quote from that exact DOT experiment. He writes, "Hose on patio can be twitched at will. Mentally, sensory interpretation is wild, but controllable." I mean, wow. This single sentence perfectly captures the controlled insanity at the heart of his scientific method. He is hallucinating that he can literally move a garden hose with his mind, yet a part of his brain is still sitting back with a clipboard, taking notes, observing that the wildness is in fact controllable.
So, what does this all mean? Well, this brings us to the core of what makes these lab notes so deeply compelling. This notebook is essentially a totally unique historical bridge. On one side, you have the hard, empirical molecular science of atomic weights and dosages. And on the other side, you have the completely unmapped, boundless depths of the human mind. Shulgin didn't just study these compounds, he became the very instrument of measurement. And in doing so, he laid the foundational groundwork for modern cytopharmacology. This matters immensely to us today, because these exact notes helped spark the modern renaissance in psychedelic therapy, and they deeply, deeply informed our modern understanding of serotonin receptors.
And that leaves us with one seriously profound mystery. Think about it. If a tiny shift in a hand-drawn chemical equation can completely rewrite a person's perception of reality, command the sensation of time, and generate boundless empathy or terrifying visions, are our everyday baseline emotions just natural chemistry waiting to be decoded? It's a fascinating thought to take with you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the reality around you.